are coming on the air live in L.A. with that new escalation between California and President Trump. Hundreds of Marines on their way to this city right now, even as the state late today says it plans to sue the feds for sending in the National Guard over immigration raid protests. Our brand new reporting on the rules of force for those Marines, where the White House goes from here, and our team live on the ground for a gut check. Plus, with the president's travel ban 2.0 now in effect as of today, the stories we're hearing from people caught in the middle. Then the huge win for Blake Lively tonight, with the judge taking her side and tossing out a defamation suit filed by her former co-star, Justin Baldoni, why Lively's team calls it total vindication. Plus, the new images of the Israeli military boarding a boat carrying one of the most famous climate activists in the world, trying to bring food into Gaza, where Greta Thunberg is now. And in tonight's original, the real-life league of their own, as Major League Baseball teams up with pro softball players. But can this new league succeed where others have failed? We're going to take you behind the scenes coming up later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, on assignment in Los Angeles tonight. And in just the last 45 minutes, we're learning more about the president mobilizing Marines. So we're talking active duty military here to Los Angeles. This is a big new escalation in the fight between the feds and the state over immigration raid protests. Want to show you here a live shot. This is where these protests are, how they look as we speak right now. Two defense officials telling our team about 700 Marines are getting mobilized. They're going to go to support the National Guard. Remember, a National Guard that the state of California says they don't want and they don't need here in this state. That's why California says it will sue the president for activating those troops. Now, President Trump says he had to take that step to stop protests like we've seen for the last 72 hours. You see some of it here. Access cut off to one big highway at one point. And listen to this. Flashbangs going off, sending smoke into the air. Here you see a squad car set on fire. You saw protesters lined up, standing face to face with police. We know at least 56 people have been arrested in the protests so far, according to police, including one top labor leader. He's making his first court appearance just in the last half hour, with more than 1,000 people rallying to support him here in L.A. late this afternoon. But you know who could be arrested next, maybe? The state's governor, Gavin Newsom, who basically dared the president's border czar to slap the cuffs on him. And the president is not exactly ruling that out late today. Watch.
Gavin Newsom he's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it?
I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing. He's done a terrible job. Look, I like Gavin Newsom. He's a nice guy, but he's grossly incompetent.
So some of the big questions moving forward tonight. First, will there be more confrontations between police and protesters? Remember, over the last couple of nights, we've seen things pick up around 4 L.A. time, 7 out east. What will the president's next move be now that he's sending in these Marines? And what are those Marines here exactly to do? Will this stay contained to Southern California, or could we see those protests spread? We have team coverage here in L.A. as well as back home in Washington. But I want to start on the ground with our Jacob Soboroff, who's in Cypress Park, California. Jacob, you've been on the ground. Help us understand what we've seen today and the expectation for demonstrations tonight.
Hallie, there's a lot of fear in Los Angeles, and the tension remains really high in a city that is majority minority. 50% of the people in the county of Los Angeles, are people of color. 10% of the population of this county is undocumented by some counts, maybe as many as 1 million people. And so those folks who are, a part of the fabric of the community here are very, very scared. And that is why you saw people starting on Friday go out to the streets. You might wonder, what am I doing at a Home Depot? This is one of the first locations on Friday morning that Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, other federal agents, showed up at and approached day laborers, people who stand on the street corner here looking for work on a daily basis to do menial, and important tasks at people's homes and in business places. And they ended up going to the streets, like you see on the left-hand side of your screen. But it all started at places like this. And why that's so unusual is that in decades past, under Democratic and Republican administrations, wide-scale enforcement efforts by presidential administrations and the federal government didn't target people who had no criminal records, who were workers, who were standing on street corners on a regular or routine basis at a place like this. And Tom Homan, when I spoke to him over the weekend, told me that's exactly the plan. Every day, he said, there will be immigration enforcement operations in Los Angeles. And the scenes you're seeing on your screen definitely are, I think, scary for a lot of people around the country and certainly unpleasant for people in Los Angeles to look at. But I want to make a point that they are not the rule here. They're the exception to it in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is largely a peaceful city at this hour and at this moment. And yes, in the evenings, we have seen people go out to the streets and agitate against law enforcement. That is not uncommon in Los Angeles, whether it's a Lakers parade or a Dodgers championship or a protest of another nature. What's different is that the National Guard has been deployed to the streets of Los Angeles after immigration enforcement raids that start at places like this. And the President of the United States has taken that authority from the governor and deployed his own National Guard out to Los Angeles to what he says is support and protect the immigration officials that are on the ground here. I just want to give you a quick look, and I know we have limited time, but this is where it all went down, Hallie. Those agents came and they chased they chased folks here on the street, undocumented day laborers, from the Home Depot here on Friday to this corner here and across the street over to that McDonald's, literally sending people scurrying, scrambling for what they saw as safety. And that's why I say it's terrifying to a lot of people here. People that are just going about their day-to-day lives or a part of this community are having their lives upended in a way that I think it's fair to say hasn't been seen here on the scale that we have seen it over this weekend in a very long time. That's what's brought people out to the streets in a largely peaceful manner, but there have certainly been those agitators. And that is why, Hallie, the president has said he wants to put these troops out on the streets of Los Angeles over the weekend and tonight.
We're going to talk more about this mobilization of these Marines coming in from out at 29 Palms, out near Joshua Tree, for folks who know Southern California, in just a second, Jacob. But the other piece of developing news just in the last couple of hours is this lawsuit. The state of California is filing and set to file against the federal government here, Jacob. You talked about some of the fear that you've reported on people feeling in some of these neighborhoods here in L.A. Can you talk through the practical impact of this lawsuit? Would it put a pause on this National Guard deployment? How does that work?
When I was with Governor Newsom last night and he told me about this lawsuit, he said it was because the federal government is usurping his authority. You know, they're using Title 10 of the U.S. Code to deploy the National Guard troops to the streets of Los Angeles. And what Governor Gavin Newsom said is that that hadn't been done in consultation or in cooperation with the governor of California, as the Title 10 code says that it should be. And so the goal of this lawsuit is to very straightforwardly recall those troops off the streets of Los Angeles and give them back to the control of Governor Newsom. I talked to Rob Bonta, the Attorney General's office today. They said as well, as he's getting ready to file that lawsuit in the Northern District of California, that the whole idea is to make sure that the state gets control back of their National Guard troops, because those National Guard troops are usually on call at a time like this for things like wildfires. They were out here in the aftermath of the LA wildfires for months, Hallie, engaged in the effort to rebuild and recover this city. And now they've got National Guard troops engaged in protecting an ICE detention center in downtown LA from protesters who are obviously angry about what's happening here.
Jacob Soboroff, we're glad to see you starting us off tonight in L.A. Jacob, thank you very much. I want to go to David Noriega now, who is also here in Los Angeles. David, what are you seeing from your vantage point on the ground?
Hallie, I'm going to show you exactly where I am. Right behind me is the federal building, which is where the National Guard troops have been stationed since yesterday. It's the federal building on one side, and directly across from it is the Metropolitan Detention Center, where people who get picked up by ICE in the LA area are often held temporarily before they're moved on to bigger ICE detention centers. This is where the center of the action really was for most of yesterday, because those National Guard troops were really the target of the protests. Now, over the course of yesterday, what happened is that there were a couple of sort of minor scuffles between protesters and National Guard troops and DHS police, at which point LAPD stepped in and started forcibly moving protesters away from the federal building, away from those federal properties. And what you're seeing now is basically the product of that crowd control action by local law enforcement. I'm going to ask Alan to pan once again over there to show you what is hopefully a very clear picture of a line of LAPD officers in riot gear holding at bay a group of protesters, relatively small group of protesters that just arrived here in the last hour or so. However, this group of protesters is about to grow, possibly pretty dramatically, because the rally that was happening, the union rally to protest the arrest of David Huerta, the union leader here in LA, that was happening at Grand Park, 3 or 4 blocks away, a contingent from that group, we're told, is on its way here. Now, the face-off that you see here is perfectly peaceful. As you can see, it has at a couple of moments gotten a little bit tense, but definitely not anything that I would describe as even remotely violent. We have a substantial number of clergy here from multiple denominations who are, praying with protesters, communicating very clearly with police. I spoke to the police captain who's in charge of this scene. He said basically, that everything seems to be under control for the time being. Hallie, one thing that I can't help thinking about, having been here all of yesterday and now being here again today, is that if you had asked me like an hour and a half ago how things were going to go today, I probably would have told you that everything was shaping up to be a lot calmer, a lot mellower than it was yesterday. Protests tend to be more rowdy during the weekends. A lot more people come out. That changed in the last hour when, President Trump announced that he was going to be sending active duty Marines to Los Angeles. What I saw yesterday was that the deployment of National Guard troops very much poured gasoline on the flames of a protest movement that was already angry about these ICE raids, but became much angrier and had a much clearer thing to be angry about when the National Guard troops were deployed. We're going to get the exact same response to the deployment of these active duty Marines. The stated purpose of the Marines is to protect federal property. That federal property is the building that you see behind me. That's what they're here ostensibly to protect. As you can see, there are, I can't exactly count them from here, but like at least 24 National Guard troops posted outside of that building. You have several, a couple hundred yards between them and the line of LAPD officers preventing protesters from getting anywhere near. When things became just slightly tense, maybe an hour and 15 minutes ago, LAPD immediately came out with the 40 millimeter rubber bullet rounds that they are at any moment, at the slightest provocation, prepared to fire at the ground towards protesters, basically at protesters' feet, to skip them towards the protesters, to push them back. I saw that happen multiple times yesterday when they were working on pushing protesters back from that federal building behind me. I saw the officers raise those, I don't know if you saw them when Alan panned over there, no need to look now, but they have these sort of green kind of cannons that fire these rubber rounds. They have, multiple of them have them up. They've been pointing them at protesters. There's one of them right behind me, actually. You can probably see it right there. They've been pointing them at protesters. They are more than happy, more than ready to use those if things get rowdy. The reason I'm talking about this, Hallie, is because it gets to the question of why are Marines necessary on the ground in LA right now? I can tell you, being on the ground at the epicenter of the protests, I am not sure why Marines are necessary at this moment. I think there's a big disconnect between the political battle happening between Governor Newsom and Donald Trump and the actual reality of the protests here on the ground, Hallie.
Well, to that point, David, and David Noriega, thank you very much. I know you're staying close to your camera. We'll come back to you if things pick up where you are. To that point, on Marines and whether they are necessary in Los Angeles, I want to bring in our Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kuby, who is joining us tonight, I believe, over from Capitol Hill as she's working her beat. Court, you heard what David had to say there, and we're also now hearing from California Governor Gavin Newsom in literally the last maybe 90 seconds or so, right as David and Jacob were talking, saying that from his understanding, so this is from the state's governor, saying that from Governor Newsom's understanding, this movement is essentially Marines moving from one base to another base, and the governor says that they are not being deployed. They are being mobilized, as you and the team have reported, but there is a distinction between that and a deployment. Help us understand, what is the functional practicality of Marines moving out of 29 Palms tonight?
Yeah, so that is what defense officials are telling us as well, that in fact these up to 700 Marines who are based at 29 Palms are expected to start moving to Camp Pendleton as early as tonight as part of this mobilization, okay? But what this does not mean is that we will actually see U.S. Marines on the streets in LA tonight. That is just not clear at this point. Hallie, it's happening very quickly. We're trying to stay on top of it. But again, at this point, we do not have any indication that these Marines will actually be on the ground in LA tonight. Now, what this mobilization means is they are going forward to help augment the California National Guard, who've already been brought in there under these Title X authorities, and to help support them on the ground there until more National Guard troops can actually move forward. As we've been hearing all day, there's at least 300 National Guard on the ground there. They got in yesterday in LA. They are protecting federal property, federal personnel on the ground in LA, but there are more that are likely to be called in. We've been working on that all day today to see exactly what the numbers are. We just frankly don't have a good answer beyond the 300 that were confirmed late last night. But what's important to remember here is all of these troops, okay? So the Marines, the 700 Marines, the up to 2,000 National Guard soldiers who have been authorized under Title 10, they all have the same rules of force when they are there on this deployment. That means that they are not allowed to conduct any law enforcement activities at all. So no arrests, nothing like that. They can support law enforcement, LAPD and ICE, DHS, whoever is there on the ground, they can support them, but they cannot, it would violate the law if they were actually engaged in the more classic law enforcement activities that we might be seeing there on the ground, Hallie.
Okay, so Court, let me just ask you this, though. Understanding everything you just laid out, if the Marines are not going to end up on the ground in Los Angeles tonight, potentially, where are they going? Where are they moving to?
They're moving from 29 Palms to Camp Pendleton. So basically one Marine base to another one, right there in California. They're moving closer. But at this point, and Hallie, look, this has literally been developing hour by hour. So it is possible that we will see some Marines there. You know, and you know, you're there watching it all unfold. It's possible we will see them there tonight at some point. But at this point, that is not the orders. There is no official order to send them in. It is to move basically closer to Camp Pendleton. This is what a mobilization means. You know, if we were talking about a deployment, you know, then they would actually be moving to be part of this task force. As part of the mobilization, they will fall under this task force that was created by U.S. Northern Command called Task Force 51. It's commanded by a 2-star general, and that individual has overall operational authority for this entire mission for the military. But again, the defense officials we're talking to are saying this is temporary right now with the Marines. Get them closer. If we have to bring them in, we will. But it's more of a standby in a closer location situation.
So then, big picture, Courtney, is this normal? Is this typical, based on your years of experience covering the Pentagon, for a Marine group, essentially, to move in to back up a National Guard deployment? Is this something that might typically happen in, you know, I would say any other instance like this? We haven't seen an instance like this in decades where the Guard is called in over the, you know, objections of the state here. But help us understand some of that context.
No, this is not common. It's what there are some parts of this that are common, right? The National Guard being mobilized on Title 10, that's federal activation, that is common. But what we usually see is that they go overseas for a combat mission, that they are not conducting Title 10 authorities here in the United States, Hallie.
Courtney Kube, live for us there back home in Washington. Court, we're glad to have you, your expertise, your reporting. Thank you so much for all of the updates. We appreciate that. We want to get to Morgan Chesky now, who's outside City Hall in L.A. And Morgan, I know that your live shot has gone in and out as you are in the thick of it there. I know they were protesting the arrest of that labor leader we mentioned at the top of the show. Where do things stand on that front? And how does this correlate with the rest of the activities of a city that would normally play out? School graduation today, for example, happening here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Hallie, very fluid situation across the entire city. You mentioned that labor leader that was arrested yesterday, David Huerta. He was one of the motivating factors, his federal detention, for why about 1,000 people showed up at this downtown park today. We had people from different groups, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, all wanting to make sure their voices were heard. This rally, Hallie, lasted about 2.5 hours long. And the main message is that they believe the presence of those National Guard, of the National Guard here in L.A. has only raised the temperature here. And they are saying that essentially families are being torn apart as a result of these ICE raids, whereas the Trump administration pointed to the fact that dangerous bad actors are being taken off the streets. They're saying that people being rounded up in the parking lots of Home Depots are not the criminals this administration needs to be going after here. All that said, Hallie, it has been a fluid situation. This street behind me had a march go down on it just a few short minutes ago until LAPD went by to kind of make sure that they kept moving here. So traffic temporarily blocked there. But as it stands for that labor leader, Hallie, he is facing federal charges today for impeding the actions of an ICE agent whenever they arrived at a workplace within the last 48 hours or so to conduct some of those arrests, those detentions there. We have yet to hear from him or his attorney, but the name David Huerta was definitely chanted by a large majority of the crowd here. As far as other events being impacted by this, I mean, we're seeing this play out in real time, Hallie, with school graduations being postponed, with other events being canceled as a result of really this ongoing presence, whether it be of ICE agents, of law enforcement, of those National Guardsmen that came in within the last 24 hours or so. And now everyone is wondering, to your point with Courtney, where these Marines could potentially end up.
Right.
All that to say that there is certain, definitely a tension in the air here, particularly in downtown Los Angeles. Hallie.
Morgan Chesky live for us on the ground in L.A. Morgan, thank you for being there. We appreciate your reporting. We'll come and check back in with you, I know, as the night continues. Appreciate that. In other headlines tonight, anger from around the world right now, with millions of people from 12 countries across Africa and the Middle East now blocked from coming into the U.S.
Trump's story is propaganda. There is security in our country.
What more can we expect from being worse than what we are already experiencing? Since President Trump...
The House's new travel ban stopping people from places like Afghanistan, Iran, Libya from traveling into the U.S. unless they're already here with the visa. And it's also making it really hard for people in 7 other countries like Venezuela to get in. The president says all of this is meant to prevent terrorism and protect national security in this country. So far, by the way, this ban has not triggered any legal challenges yet. But it does mean a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people, like one Burmese American woman speaking with NBC News, who says it feels like the rug's been pulled out from under her after she bought plane tickets to bring family from Myanmar to the U.S. the day before the ban was announced. Our chief international affairs correspondent, Andrew Mitchell, is covering this one. There was a travel ban in the president's first term, right? 1.0. There's a big difference for this 2.0 version, which is that here we are, something like 18 hours into it, and this has not been taken to court yet. As far as we know, there have not been significant legal challenges filed against it because of how the White House tried to learn from what they did that first time around, right?
Exactly. It took a couple of years and several trips to the Supreme Court. They finally got the travel ban approved after they'd watered it down. This time they were much more careful. They provided evidence that the people from this country had a higher rate of overstaying their visas, so not complying with the laws. And they are establishing country-by-country fact sheets that those countries do not do a good enough job of stopping people from entering who shouldn't be entering. But this affects everybody from those countries, from 12 countries. A couple of exceptions are carved out for World Cup travelers and Olympics sports athletes, basically, and also for SIVs, people with these special visas because they worked for the U.S. military, but not for their relatives, and that is the rub. So it's become a big issue.
Our team has also been on the ground in Cuba talking to a woman living in America who travels back and forth to bring her family medicine and food. Andrea, let me play just a little bit of that.
And they'll be harming us, too, because we won't be able to come and see them anymore or be able to provide for them. That's the only way they had to get what they need, because they don't have it here. And now they're going to stop all that. It's going to harm them a lot.
This gets, Andrea, to the idea of practical impacts, tangible impacts for people who are in the crosshairs of this fairly sweeping ban.
Absolutely. And in the case of Afghanistan, it's more than just economic, because people who are families related to people who came here because they worked with the U.S., they are being targeted. And so we talked to one such man, a man who came here. He then became a U.S. citizen, enlisted in the Marines. He had come here after working for several years for the U.S. military, 7 years as a translator. He then came here, became a citizen, enlisted in the Marines, went back to Afghanistan at great risk, and worked for another tour of duty, came back here and tried to get his family here. Well, they got approved. They got approved in December of this year after several years of waiting after the withdrawal, as you know. And they were all approved to come. He told his dad, aging parents, be prepared to come on 2 days' notice. So they sold everything. They sold their car. They sold their business. And then, of course, the travel ban came, and now they are permanently blocked. He feels guilty. And I asked him what happens to people who are identified. We couldn't identify his work right now, so we shot him from the back. But what would happen to people back home who found out that they were related to anyone who would work for the U.S. military? Here was his answer. What does the Taliban do to people that they find out have relatives who worked for the U.S.?
Not only Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and they are active and they are in the sleeping cells. If they find people that, okay, they have someone who served in the U.S. military, and of course they will not be safe, like including my family.
And so American veterans here all over the country are really angry about this. This includes a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump. But there isn't enough organization, enough outcry, really. And it affects people in 12 countries, not just Afghanistan, but from other conflict zones as well. Hallie.
Our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, thank you very much for that.
Thank
to
you.
New York now, where the sex trafficking trial for Diddy, that bombshell trial, is wrapping up for the day in just the last couple of minutes here, with his ex-girlfriend testifying about how she says Sean Combs beat her up during a violent fight that allegedly left her with 2 golf ball-sized welts on her forehead. The woman, going by the pseudonym Jane, telling the jury this happened last June after she had accused Combs of being a pedophile for dating somebody at least 25 years younger than him. Jane says she pushed his head into a marble counter as he bent down to tie his shoe and started throwing things, which sparked a whole fight. Eventually, Jane says that Diddy put her in a chokehold, lifted her off the ground by her neck. She told the jury that he punched her, kicked her when she was on the ground, and dragged her back into the house by her arm and hair. Our team inside court telling us at one point earlier in the day, Diddy turned towards his mom, who's been attending the trial. She's been in court. He turned to her and mouthed, "I love you, mommy." Remember, prosecutors accuse Sean Combs of sex trafficking and racketeering. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges, and Diddy's defense team says all the sexual encounters he had were consensual. Chloe Melas is outside court here in New York. This is potentially a pivotal moment here for the trial because Jane, as she's going by, is supposed to be the prosecution's last witness, Chloe. So talk about how the prosecution used this testimony today to begin essentially wrapping up their case, because soon it's going to be the defense's turn to put their witnesses on the stand.
You know, what's really fascinating to me, Hallie, is that the whole reason that we saw Cassie Ventura testify right out of the gate, because she really was the key witness for the government, the star witness, if you want to call her that, is because she was about to give birth. And so everyone thought that, okay, those were the most explosive allegations. But then when we had Jane today on her 3rd day of testimony talk about Combs breaking down doors, like you said, choking her, lifting her up by her neck, this all goes towards the force, the threats of violence, how scared she was, not even threats, like the actual acts of violence going towards the sex trafficking, because prosecutors have to prove force, fraud, and coercion. There's a very high bar to meet. But then you have transportation to engage in prostitution. He's facing 2 counts of that. And Hallie, she has given days, hours worth of testimony about procuring escorts from an escort service, how she would pay them, but this was all at Combs's behest. It was very damning testimony, and it's going to be interesting to see how Combs' defense team tackles the cross-examination here, because you don't want to go too hard on a victim of sexual and physical violence. And I also want to point out, we heard voice notes today of Combs leaving these voice notes. You know, when you text somebody, you can also send them a text message that's of your voice. And we heard Combs, in his own words, respond to her when she said that she didn't want to participate in these hotel nights, which are also freak-offs, in which he's like, girl, it's okay. Like, you know, this was mutual. We were just into some kinky stuff. Now, that's me paraphrasing it. Maybe at some point people will hear those voice notes for themselves. But again, like, a lot of damning things coming out today as the prosecution is wrapping up their side of the case.
Chloe Melas, outside trial in New York. More to watch, I know, this week ahead. Chloe, thank you. Coming up here on the show, the legal setback tonight for Justin Baldoni, why a judge is tossing out his $400 million lawsuit against Blake Lively. Plus, how police in London say somebody ended up on the tarmac. Look at that at Heathrow. Next. A big win tonight for Blake Lively over Justin Baldoni, with her team calling it complete vindication after a federal judge tossed out Baldoni's $400 million defamation lawsuit. So this suit was filed back in January. Remember, Baldoni in it accused his co-star and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, of trying to destroy Baldoni's reputation by suing him for sexual harassment on the set of the movie It Ends With Us. It all stems from a complaint filed by Lively last year, accusing Baldoni and a producer on the film of repeatedly violating her physical boundaries and making inappropriate and sexual comments while on set. Danny Savalos is joining us now. I think everybody remembers this, Danny. It was super high profile. The suit, the countersuit, and now today, the judge tossing out Baldoni's defamation countersuit here. Why did the judge do this? What was the rationale?
Well, first, these kinds of motions are very hard to win. Judges almost never dismiss cases at this stage. Baldoni got every benefit of the doubt, and every allegation factually in his complaint was assumed to be true, and yet it still got dismissed. And the reasoning is that the defamation claims were largely, not completely, but largely based on Lively's complaint she submitted to a government agency, and those complaints are privileged. In other words, you can say things in those kinds of government agency complaints that you cannot say in a tweet or in a letter to somebody else. Then they would be defamation.
So this was not, just so I understand this and so people understand this, this was not the judge dismissing this suit on like a technicality, you know, it missed a deadline or whatever else. This was fairly substantially on the merits, right?
Well, technically, really what this is a failure to state a claim. So in other words, what the court does is it looks at the four corners of the complaint and says, let's assume everything Baldoni says is true. Does he state a claim under the law of defamation? And the answer is no, because that complaint made to a government agency is privileged. And in addition, they hadn't alleged enough knowledge that the statements were false.
So does Baldoni have any recourse here? Could he and his team rework this lawsuit and refile something similar, or is that the end of the story there?
Yes and no. As to defamation and a claim for, say, civil extortion, those are out, and they're out for good. He is allowed to refile on claims such as the tortious interference with contract and breach of the duty of good faith in a contract. Those sound like a lot of words, but I will tell you, having filed these claims myself, these are not considered nearly as powerful as some of the other claims brought. I typically add them at the end of a laundry list of allegations or counts. It's usually the last or second to last counts. So it's not the strongest claim, and it's little consolation that he can go back and refile those claims.
In a statement, Blake Lively's team calls this a total victory and complete vindication. In your view, is it?
I would call it a near total victory because Baldoni's complaint is certainly on life support at this stage, but not completely gone. I'm really curious to see what, if anything, even really remains and what they choose to refile.
There was also a piece that people might remember where the New York Times was sued, I believe, for libel in this suit as well that was dismissed. The judge threw that out as well. Was it for the same rationale, Danny, or a different reason?
Essentially, yes. So if Lively's claims were privileged because she made them to a government agency, then the New York Times reporting on those allegations are similarly privileged, protected. They cannot be defamatory.
Danny Savalos putting it into plain English for us tonight, as always. Danny, thank you very much for that. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a Colombian presidential candidate is in critical condition right now after being shot in the head during a rally this weekend, according to doctors. You can see hundreds of people gathered outside the hospital where he's being treated. Police say the suspect has been arrested. They're now looking into how the gun he allegedly used in the attack made its way from Arizona to Colombia. Number 2, have you heard about Sly Stone, the legendary singer, dying at the age of 82? He's best known as the frontman for Sly and the Family Stone, so think, everyday people, dance to the music. His reps say he died from a long battle with lung disease and other health issues. He is being remembered by so many tonight. Number 3, new video shows a man being chased down the tarmac. Look at that at Heathrow over in London. The airport hasn't really confirmed, what is this about? Why was he out there? Why was he running? Who is he? An airport spokesperson says he was removed, obviously, and that airport operations are back to normal by now. Number 4, meteorologists are looking at a new hurricane that has formed off the west coast of Mexico, Hurricane Barbara. Cat 1 at the moment. But it is getting stronger here. The Hurricane Center has a couple warnings out now. They say life-threatening surf. The rip conditions are really intense at beaches along the coast there. We're watching that one to see if it turns into anything more. Number 5, the Indianapolis Colts announcing that the 3 daughters of owner Jim Irsay will be taking over control of the team after Irsay's death last month. The daughters had been serving as vice chairs. One of them, Carly Irsay Gordon, will take on the role of principal owner, all ahead of the next football season, which kicks off in just a few months. Of course, with the Philadelphia Eagles retaining their role as Super Bowl world champions. When we come back, we'll take you overseas, where Greta Thunberg's so-called Freedom Flotilla has apparently been intercepted. What we're learning about where the world-famous climate activist is now. Plus, the pretty scary scene in Delaware, how police say this car ended up inside a Dollar Tree. A big update tonight to an international showdown involving one of the world's most well-known climate activists. Greta Thunberg and others on an aid boat trying to get to Gaza are now in Israel at a port there, according to that country's foreign ministry, which posted a picture of Thunberg on X saying the passengers are all going through medical exams now to make sure they're okay. This is a group that was stopped after trying to break this naval blockade that Israel has and deliver humanitarian help to Gaza. They'd been on the water. You see some of the images here for about a week. The so-called Freedom Flotilla organization, which had organized this voyage, said that the activists were kidnapped, in their words, by Israeli forces. But Israel's foreign ministry has described the whole thing as basically a PR stunt. They called it the selfie yacht. Matt Bradley is joining us now. It certainly has focused attention on this boat, on Greta Thunberg, and on what they were trying to do to get aid to Gaza here. Tell us more about what we know about where Thunberg and these others are and what Israel's saying.
Yeah, well, it sounds like they're in Ashdod port, which is just north of the Gaza Strip. They were brought there by the Israelis, who intercepted their sailing ship. It was, it had masts, it had sails. It was caught right off the coast, northern coast of Egypt. And it looks as though, according to the foreign ministry, that all 12 of these activists are going to be brought here to Tel Aviv, to Ben Gurion Airport, just down the road, where they're going to all be deported very quickly to their home countries. So that's kind of what's next here. But, as you mentioned, Hallie, the Israeli government has been doing their very best in all of their public statements, not just to diminish this, but really to mock it, to make fun of it, to call this the celebrity sort of selfie yacht, to talk about these people are celebrities. They even use the term, the show is over. To them, this was a sideshow, and they want to make it clear that this was, as much as they see it, a joke.
To Thunberg, of course, Matt, and the others on that aid boat, they saw it as, and still see it as a matter of literally life and death, especially with growing concerns about starvation in Gaza from some observers here. Can you walk us through that piece of it? Because that is continuing to escalate.
That's exactly right. And, the fact is, as you mentioned, Hallie, life and death for the people in Gaza, maybe not for the people who were on that boat. And that whole interception went down with almost no violence and no injuries. But the fact of the matter is, even though the aid they were bringing was minimal, it was less than a truckload, according to the Israelis, the problem in the Gaza Strip is dire. We've been seeing famine-like conditions. We've been seeing worsening humanitarian circumstances. And now we've been seeing an aid plan that really has been marked by violence ever since it started 2 weeks ago. This is a U.S.-backed aid plan where we've been seeing gunfire that has been killing more than 100 people, according to health authorities in the Gaza Strip, which is run by Hamas, just because they're lining up to try to get food. So really, when we're talking about this problem, we're talking about people who are trying to survive and getting gunned down while trying to do it. Hallie?
Matt Bradley, live for us in Tel Aviv tonight, watching all of that. Matt, keep us updated on what happens from here. Appreciate your reporting on that for us tonight. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their region in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Northeast Bureau, at least 2 people have been hurt after this car crashed into a Dollar Tree in Delaware. Look at this. You see the damage afterwards? It apparently rammed into multiple aisles. Huge mess. Police are still investigating. Out of our Western Bureau, crews in California rescuing a couple of tourists after they got stuck on a cliff. They were apparently trying to look at a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. One of them dropped their phone. tried to go after it, went down this pretty steep hill. You can see this rescue team using ropes to get him back on top of the cliff. Fortunately, everybody is okay, but do I need to give the reminder, folks? You are more important than your phone, your physical health and safety. PSA. Out of our Midwest Bureau, an endangered wolf center sending these 6 newborn wolf pups, look at them, to another state to help save them from extinction. They're headed from Missouri to New Mexico as part of a pup fostering program. There are apparently fewer than 300 of these Mexican wolf pups left in the world. The center says the pups will be fostered by 2 wild packs. Also tonight, quick check in the markets. The S&P seems to like what's being called good trade talks today between the U.S. and China after these top officials for both met in London. TBD on the next meeting, TBD on whether we're going to actually see any deal. Although the White House says, look at this, it was a good meeting. Talks were fruitful. We're also getting a look, however, at some new numbers that show just how hard this trade war is hitting. Just today, look at this. China says it saw exports to the U.S. drop by 1/3 last month. That's the biggest decline since the start of the COVID pandemic. Let me bring in now NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, who is joining us live for more on this. Vaughn, let's talk about this because the White House says it's good talks. They say we're fruitful. When will fruit be born? In other words, like, when is something more concrete going to come out of this?
It's not harvesting overnight this month, probably not this summer either, Hallie, if we're going to be realistic. And that is because the White House said it themselves, that this initial meeting that included Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, and Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, and the U.S. Trade Representative, a significant delegation for the White House's part, meeting with Chinese officials in London here today to at least to begin the potential of having trade conversations. Their issue, though, that they took up this afternoon was specifically over what they say was orders from Chinese Foreign Ministry effectively slowing down the export of rare earth minerals, particularly rare earth magnets that are used by U.S. manufacturers in the energy sector, but also high tech, but also in U.S. auto manufacturing sector. You're looking at particularly electric vehicles that rely on these rare earth magnets that come from China. When you look at rare earth minerals and where they are mined, the U.S. Geological Survey said in 2024, 70% of rare earth minerals, they came from China, just 12% mined here in the United States. And so that is where, because of this trade war, the White House has indicated and U.S. manufacturers have indicated that they had a slowdown in exports of these rare earth minerals and that are necessary to their products. So, Hallie, the question is China, as they've indicated, are they going to start sending that back again to the larger trade war going on? The U.S. is still clearly very far from any further trade negotiations, but they wanted this to at least be a first step.
Vaughn Hilliard live back home in Washington. Vaughn, thanks for the update.
Thanks,
coming up here on the show, some crypto-rich families going to extremes to try to protect their money and themselves. What some are now doing to avoid becoming targets of kidnappings or attacks. An influencer with a fortune in Bitcoin is doing something kind of extreme to protect his family's money as more attacks are targeting people who hold a lot of crypto. We've been telling you about the spike in incidents like the one you're seeing here from New York last month, criminals kidnapping, in some instances even torturing people trying to steal their crypto wallets. Enter the father of the self-proclaimed Bitcoin family. He and his wife and his 3 girls converted all their money to Bitcoin. They've been using it to travel the world full-time for years. But in the face of what they say are more threats to their safety, they've devised this super complicated system to protect their Bitcoin wallets that involve parts of their password on metal cards that are hidden across 4 continents around the world. If you're like, wait, why? What? Remember, with crypto, you do not have to have a bank. Like, you do not actually have a bank that secures your money. So anybody who gets a hold of your crypto wallet and has your password gets access to all of it, right? They get access to every cent immediately. I want to bring in CNBC's Mackenzie Sigalos, who profiled the Bitcoin family. It is fascinating, Mackenzie, because here on this show, we've talked about these so-called crypto kidnappings. And now this family thinks they've devised, in kind of this really, really wide-ranging way, a plan to keep themselves safer. Walk us through it.
So, Hallie, the Bitcoin family has actually downgraded their tech to stay safe, ditching hardware wallets entirely over concerns about backdoors and remote access. And instead, their 24-word Bitcoin seed phrase, which is the password to their fortune, is split into multiple parts. Now, some are stored digitally using encrypted platforms, but others are etched by hand into fireproof steel plates. Then each of those metal plates is hidden in a different location around the world. So it's a kind of old school encryption, decentralized, analog, and completely offline. Now, the father of the family, Diddy Combs, told me that he even swaps out certain words to throw off attackers and just memorizes which ones he changed. And it's a system that's becoming more common amid this spike in crypto kidnappings, Hallie.
Talk through that a bit, because, how is the crypto world, as you've been reporting on it, Mackenzie, adjusting to some of these new threats now, these more sophisticated criminals looking to target their money?
So as crypto becomes more widely adopted, the risks have actually gone offline, and that's led many to ditch hardware wallets. Those are the physical devices that store your private keys, because if someone steals it or forces you to unlock it, your funds disappear. Now, some have tried hiding them in vaults or high security bunkers, but that still means that you're handing control to a third party. And we've already seen the risks of centralized platforms like FTX. Even Coinbase, the biggest U.S. exchange and arguably the most trusted brand out there, recently disclosed a breach involving insiders being bribed, not hacked. And that's pushed others to store seed phrases offline. So now what we're seeing is a shift towards setups that split control, like multiple signature wallets, where several people have to approve a transaction, kind of like needing multiple keys to open one safe.
Mackenzie Sigalos, that is just so interesting. Thank you for bringing us a glimpse into this world. We appreciate it. Great to see you on the show, as always. Thank you. Coming up here on the broadcast, our team's in-depth access to the start of a new softball league, truly a real-world league of their own, how MLB power players and a legend of the game are pushing hard to make this a field of dreams. To tonight's original now, with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, it's the new Women's Sports League taking its turn at bat, quite literally, with our team getting behind-the-scenes access to the debut of this pro softball league. They're partnering with Major League Baseball. But the game plan, man, that one's tricky, right? They've got to grab fans' attention and succeed where others have failed. Our Shaquille Brewster has more from Chicago.
This opening day first pitch.
And we are underway in a new era for professional softball.
Is the opening play of a historic expansion in women's sports.
There's a thirst for the game and people will come watch. We love softball.
Fans flocking to see the inaugural Athletes Unlimited season.
Pretty excited.
The first pro women's softball league with the backing of Major League Baseball.
We're trying to grow the game, and we finally found people who are backing us and growing the game with us.
Decades after women picked up the bat for the boys who went overseas during World War II with a league of their own, as immortalized in the hit movie with Tom Hanks and Gina Davis.
There's no crying! There's no crying in baseball!
Now MLB's on the same team, boosting the new league, assisting with operational costs, airing games online and MLB Network, and marketing on its massive social media platforms.
They're giving us the same coverage that they are giving to their 30 clubs. So that in and of itself is just enormous.
A moment that was a long time coming for Commissioner Kim Ang, who spent decades as an MLB executive and was the first woman GM in any of the major U.S. sports leagues.
A lot of my career has been about providing opportunities for women, paving that path, and I see this as no different.
Her league planning to grow from 4 to 6 city-based teams next season.
Where we are with women's sports is just an incredible moment. It's actually a movement.
It's a movement that's building on decades of softball success at the collegiate and Olympic levels.
The fans have been waiting. We've been waiting.
Gold medalist Jenny Finch is an MLB softball ambassador. The Chicago area field hosting the sold-out inaugural game, the ballpark at Rosemont, sits at 27 Jenny Finch Way.
We want this to be the normal, and it is the normal, and that's what I think excites us the most, is these girls are growing up with, it's here.
Hoping for another big moment for women's sports. The WNBA celebrating attendance and all-time viewership records. In soccer, consistent Olympic success driving skyrocketing popularity and even competing professional leagues. But softball has struggled with several attempts dating back to the 70s to create a league. One with Billie Jean King's backing getting too expensive. Another, which featured tons of stars like Jenny Finch, ended after the pandemic.
I think that's what excites us most, is everybody is all in, and there is no, it's not going to work. Like, it's going to work. The fans have been waiting.
Fans like Chris Lake and his daughter grabbing their seat early to make sure they didn't miss the first game.
Because you always tell your kids that they can be whatever they want to be and do whatever they want to do, and when they can see that actually coming to fruition, I think it just makes it that much better.
A new partnership expanding the dreams of young softball players.
After college, then we have a chance to actually still be able to play.
And bringing softball to generations of new fans.
We can know, like, maybe when we're older, we can come and do this too.
Love to see it. Shaquille Brewster is joining us now. Shaq, there is some degree of proof of concept when you look at what's happening on the college level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you can look as recently as last week with the Women's College World Series, where on the field you had intense competition. Two Texas powerhouses really going after one another and putting on a show. But you see it there in your screen. You also had fans tuning in record numbers. Both Game 1 and Game 2 seeing 2.1 million viewers each night. For Game 1, that was up 11% from a high in 2024, a number that stuck with me. Game 2 peaked at 2.6 million viewers, and Game 2 was on the same day as Game 1 of the NBA Finals. So you're talking about a league and a sport that's holding its own against other professional leagues. And that's the point that you're hearing when you have advocates, when you have people advocating for women's sports, that it's about opportunity. Almost if you build it, they will come. You see with this level of competition, and you're seeing that with softball as well, that if you build it, if you put it on TV for people to watch, you'll have fans come and cheer these women on.
Chuck, I like that. If you build it, they will come. Did you just think of that?
that was the Shaquille Brewster original, Hallie. Don't ask anyone else or Google it.
Oh, I bet. Okay. Very good. Shaq Brewster live from his own personal field of dreams. Thank you so much, Shaq. Appreciate you. And thank you all for watching, as always. That's a wrap for this hour from right here in Los Angeles, but we've got much more coverage picking up right now. We are live here in L.A. with the new escalation between California and President Trump. Hundreds of Marines mobilized now, expected to head to this city, or at least closer to this city, even as the state late today is suing the feds for sending in the National Guard over those immigration raid protests. Our brand new reporting on the rules of force for those Marines, where the White House goes from here, and our team live on the ground for a gut check. Plus, with the president's travel ban 2.0 now in effect, the stories we're hearing from people caught in the middle. Then 6 people confirmed killed tonight off the coast of San Diego. What we know about the plane that crashed right off the ocean. Then, as we've been on the air, a bombshell from HHS Secretary RFK Jr. gutting the team that advises the CDC on vaccines. Why he says he's making that move now. And the big win for Blake Lively tonight, a judge taking her side and tossing out a defamation suit filed by her former co-star, Justin Baldoni. Why Lively's team calls that total vindication. Coming up later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie on assignment here in Los Angeles. And in just the last maybe 90 minutes or so, we're learning the president is mobilizing Marines. So we're talking active duty military here to Los Angeles in what would be a big new escalation in the fight between the feds and the state over these immigration raid protests. Want to give you a live shot. I'm looking at the screen here. This is what it looks like right now, not too far from where I'm standing. You can see protesters, some of the demonstrators that have gathered there, a fairly small group at the moment, with 2 defense officials telling our team about 700 Marines will be mobilized to support the National Guard. Although it's not clear they're going to end up in L.A. tonight. This is just hours after California says it's going to sue the president for activating those National Guard troops. National Guard troops that California says we don't want and we don't need. Now, President Trump says he had to make this move. He says he had to stop protests like we've seen in the last 72 hours. You see some of it here. Access at one point cut off from one of the big freeways here in the city. And listen to this. Flashbangs you hear going off, that smoke in the air. You see a squad car set on fire. And protesters at one point lined up, standing face to face with police. Police say at least 56 people have been arrested in these demonstrations, including a top labor leader making his first court appearance late this afternoon. You see here some 1,000 people rallying to support him in the LA area. But you know who could end up arrested next? The state's governor, Gavin Newsom, who essentially dared the president's border czar to slap the cuffs on him. And the president's not exactly ruling that out late today. Watch.
Gavin Newsom he's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing. He's done a terrible job. Look, I like Gavin Newsom. He's a nice guy, but he's grossly incompetent.
So the big questions moving forward here. Will there be more confrontations, possibly as soon as tonight, between police and protesters? We've seen things pick up the last couple nights, like right around now, 3, 4 o'clock LA time, 6, 7 o'clock out east. What will the president's next move be now that he is mobilizing troops? And what are those Marines even coming to LA to do? And will this remain fairly contained to Southern California, or could we see immigration raid protests spread to other cities as well? We've got team coverage here out west and back home in Washington, but I want to start on the ground with Gotti Schwartz, who's at a pretty active location right now with this labor leader, David Huerta, now released. He's talking to a crowd there. He's become, in so many ways, a symbol for the people who have come out in L.A.
That's right. David Huerta is talking probably a few hundred yards away from we are. Earlier, this crowd that's right here in front of the federal building, they were chanting, free David Huerta, free David Huerta. He has now been released, and the news of that has started to spread here. This is the biggest crowd. LAPD has been clearing most of the other crowds around the federal building. The backside, they just went in and they put up some skirmish lines. But you see, traffic is still open here on Los Angeles Street. And I'm going to take you over here. I don't want to stand in one place for too long, but we're going to try to be... I'm going to just show you why it's such a tense situation. We were talking about those Marines that are going to be coming in just a little bit. These are not Marines. These are members of the California National Guard here. You see them right here. They're facing off. The protesters are facing off with those California National Guard members and members of Homeland Security standing side by side. You see California National Guard. They were holding the less than lethal, it looks like those paintball guns. And then all the way down, they keep asking people to get down off of the stairs. As soon as people start to approach the soldiers ask them to come back down. So far, these soldiers have been yelled at for quite some time with these bullhorns, and you see some of them are starting to throw bottles, and then you see people on the front line right here trying to keep the peace. We've seen members of the clergy trying to keep the peace right here along the front line, and then there are other organized protesters that are trying to keep the temperature down. But again, it's very, very difficult, as you see, because this street right here is open. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Excuse me. We got to be careful with these signs over here, because there are some signs that are very inflammatory. There's the normal ones that you see at most protests that are calling police names. And then there's something that I haven't seen in Los Angeles before, and that is signs that are openly calling for violence against officers, violence against President Trump. So we're trying to be careful about what we show on these walls, but this will become something that people are talking about going forward, because it is all across this area in downtown Los Angeles. But again, this is the federal building. These right here, Hallie, these are National Guard soldiers. We don't know exactly where those 500 to 700 additional soldiers, the Marines, are coming to reinforce, if it's going to be another federal building here in Los Angeles or it's going to be this federal building. But what we've seen, it's very difficult for authorities and anyone to kind of come into this building, because they have to get through crowds of protesters. So we're going to be waiting to see what happens there. But again, so far, we've heard that those soldiers, those Marines, have not left 29 Palms. So we just don't have an update as to when they could actually arrive. But 500 to 700, that would be about the size of the crowd that's right here in front of this federal building. Hallie?
on the left side of our screen, for viewers at home, you're seeing that aerial shot of where Gotti and his team are standing. And Gotti, you said something very interesting here, and we watched that dynamic
Hallie,
happen.
I think I might
in the
have
front
lost
row,
you.
you saw
I don't have IFB.
all right,
cell phone
then
service
you know what,
is
I'm going to
really
let you go.
spotty here, but we're going to try to establish comms, and we'll dial back in.
Gotti Schwartz, thank you. Let me go to David Noriega, who's at a different demonstration in L.A. And David, to you, one of the things we saw with Gotti, and I'm wondering if you're seeing it, is this idea that some of the organizers are essentially saying, hey, don't be throwing things, right? You saw some of the motions there from some of these folks in the front lines. This is something that California state leaders have been saying for the course of the last at least 36 hours or so, essentially saying, do not try to provoke law enforcement because that is what President Trump wants. You heard that, and I'm paraphrasing here, from Governor Gavin Newsom just last night, David.
Yeah, Hallie, so look, walk with me first. I want to show you the intersection where I am right now is where, when I talked to you about an hour ago, there was a group of protesters, small, like less than 100 large group of protesters and a group of clergy who were not just telling people not to throw things at the cops, but in some instances actually physically getting in between them and the cops. In the time since I last spoke to you, this quite large group of LAPD riot officers managed to successfully clear this intersection. And I have to say, this is significant, Hallie, without firing a single rubber round, without firing a single tear gas canister, without firing a single pepper ball, which is very different from what we saw yesterday. Now, I think what accounts for that, Hallie, is just the sheer scale, the number of officers that they have. Pretty quickly, the scales tipped so that officers well outnumbered protesters. They issued a lawful order to disperse. A number of protesters, the more peaceful protesters, voluntarily left. Those who were left behind were, again, significantly outnumbered by police. Here's what I'm thinking about watching this happen, Hallie, because it's not just about what's happening on the ground. It's also about the politics of what's happening. This right now is a massively high-stakes moment for Karen Bass and for Jim McDonnell and for the LAPD, because they are in a position where there is a spotlight on them to prove that they themselves, with the forces that they have available, can keep this city and this downtown under control without the need for either National Guard troops or much less active duty Marines. Again, this is one intersection of many intersections where Gotti is that you were just talking to. There's a lot more people here. But just based on what they did here, the sheer number of people that they're deploying. I mean, look behind me. Look at the number of motorcycles. I don't know, Alan, if you can show her the number of patrol cars, squad cars that are lined up behind me. This is, a show of force does not do justice to the scale of what we're seeing. The captain here is telling us to move off the street because they're about to reopen traffic on this, pretty busy intersection, Commercial in Aliso downtown. Look, they're doing everything that they can to nip anything in the bud, any kind of movement of protesters coming anywhere close to federal property in downtown Los Angeles. They're trying to prevent it from getting even close to happening because, again, the eyes of the nation and to some extent the eyes of the world are on them, on the LAPD, on Mayor Karen Bass, on Chief Jim McDonnell, and on Governor Gavin Newsom. Their political challenge at this point is basically proving to Donald Trump that there is no need for Marines. And whether the same thing that happened at this intersection happens at other intersections downtown, we'll have to see that. Hallie?
So that's the question, too, David, is how is this widespread? In other words, this seems to be at this point fairly contained to where you are, downtown L.A., near those federal buildings. You've got things like school graduations that are supposed to happen today for the L.A. Unified School District. How much has this spilled over, essentially, away from that sort of core of federal buildings downtown?
Look, based on what I saw yesterday, it spilled away from the federal building downtown, mainly because LAPD pushed people away from the federal building downtown. And that's where a lot of the real unrest happened, right?
Yeah.
People setting cars on fire, throwing things at cops' cars. It happened really away from these buildings because that's where LAPD, with these crowd control measures, pushed people. As far as the school graduations, yes, the LA superintendent, gave a press conference today talking about just pointing out the sheer number of undocumented students in the LA Unified School District, and not just undocumented students, but U.S. citizen students who have undocumented parents. It's one of the clearest illustrations you could ask for the sheer scale of the undocumented community in L.A. and how embedded, how connected they are with L.A. L.A. is, I think, the sort of immigrant nature of the United States is nowhere more evident than in Los Angeles, and that is evident in the schools. There have been some reports of ICE activity near some schools, but honestly, Hallie, my experience with this is that those reports kind of bubble up on social media. They often turn out to not be true. I cannot confirm that there has been any kind of widespread ICE activity in the LA area. Really, most of the focus has been on these federal properties and on these kind of evolving showdowns between law enforcement and protesters, Hallie.
David Noriega, thanks for being out there in the thick of it. We're going to keep an eye on your camera. We'll check back in with you, I know, throughout the night. Thank you. Back home in Washington, we've got our Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kuby, standing by for us live from Capitol Hill. So, Courtney, let's talk about these Marines because they have been mobilized. They have not been deployed so far as we know. And that is a distinction with a difference, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, if they were being deployed to the streets of L.A., they'd physically be moving to the streets of L.A. What we're going to watch happen here, literally in the coming hours, Hallie, is they're going to move from 29 Palms, which is one Marine installation in California, to Camp Pendleton. They're basically moving closer to L.A. Once they're at Camp Pendleton, they'll undergo some training that will sort of help them learn how to do things like crowd control and the basic rules of force that they will be operating under should they be moved to the streets of L.A. At this point, there is no real expectation that we'll see them on the streets tonight. But, Hallie, things are developing quickly, so I don't want to say it's absolutely impossible that some will be there. Officials are saying it will not take that long for them to get the training that they need. This isn't extensive. It's more sitting them down and explaining to them exactly what their left and right limits are for what they will do if, in fact, they are brought to the streets in L.A. to help support the National Guard who are already there.
Okay, so you've explained what the practical impact would be. Can you explain the broader context here? Is it normal? Is it typical? And again, we're not talking about a typical situation. To remind people, it hasn't been since the mid-60s, essentially, since the 1960s, that experts say the National Guard was deployed without the, essentially, request or ask in from the state. And California has said, we don't want these National Guard troops here. They're, in fact, suing to get them out or to stop them. Is it typical that you would have Marines move in to back up any kind of National Guard mission, Court?
No, it's not, especially not something like this. Now, this is not the first time that we have seen U.S. Marines support homeland things, right? Whether it's homeland defense, even frankly, we've even seen active duty be brought in for things like to support for natural disasters. That's not what's uncommon here. It's exactly what you just laid out, Hallie. And that is that these are troops that are being basically sent to California or activated in California against the governor's wishes. The National Guard troops are under a Title X authority. That means federal activation. They are under the Commander-in-Chief, President Donald Trump. They are under a U.S. Northern Command task force based out of Colorado. But normally, National Guard, when they're activated, would be under state active duty, meaning that they are under the governor's command and control. And why that's so critical for what we're watching literally unfold right now on this video is when the National Guard troops are under federal active duty, they are not permitted to undertake law enforcement activities. So basic things like arrests. They can support law enforcement like LAPD, DHS, ICE, who are there, but they cannot conduct the same sorts of missions that they do. We can see them protecting federal property, protecting personnel. They also, very critically, Hallie, they have the right of self-defense. That's one of the rules of force that these Marines will presumably be briefed on when they get to Camp Pendleton.
Courtney Kuby, live for us back home in Washington. Thank you. Let me go down Pennsylvania Avenue to Gabe Gutierrez at the White House, because now you have this essentially potential escalation here in this fight between the feds and the state of California, as California is now saying it will sue the federal government here. What have you heard from your sources there at the White House about how they are prepared to respond to that?
Oh, Hallie, this has been escalating for the past several days, and the administration is watching the pictures you're seeing on your screen constantly, because this is what the fight they want to have, according to one White House official telling me a short time ago. Not that they want to see violence on the street, but that they want to have this fight between the administration and these blue cities, which they view as not doing enough to crack down on illegal immigration and standing away of these mass deportations. Now, Hallie, just a short time ago here at the White House, the president was asked specifically about that lawsuit from the state of California, Governor Gavin Newsom, saying that he was suing the administration. The president responding and saying essentially that the administration feels it had no choice but to deploy the National Guard, because the president thinks that there would be increased violence, that there will be more homes burning down. And the president trying to make the case that Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass, that they are incompetent in their view, and this is why they are stepping in. Certainly, there are legal questions, Hallie, about how the president has gone about this. Notably, he has not invoked the Insurrection Act just yet. But also, Hallie, he has been using that word quite a bit over the last several days, insurrectionist. Right. Now, I did ask one White House official today, is that a sort of pretext? Are they preparing to trying to use that sort of language in order to invoke the Insurrection Act in a short time? This White House official said to not read too much into that. It would not this official wouldn't characterize it as being any sort of pretext for that. But this is something that they're watching. A lot of questions going forward about how this escalates, whether these protests, whether these clashes continue on tonight. And then a huge question will be, as you were noting with one of the other reporters, does this spread to other cities? Certainly the administration watching very closely for that. This is certainly not the first time they have clashed with local officials. They've done so with Chicago and other cities led by Democrats before. But this one definitely seems to be a huge escalation just in the last few days, Hallie.
There's also a piece of this, too, Gabe, when you look at something that we know that President Trump cares about, and that is the optics of how a particular issue is playing out. You've got one of the cable channels, Fox News, promoting appearances by the Attorney General, by the Homeland Security Secretary in prime time tonight. Dr. Phil apparently was joining some ICE agents, then sat down for this exclusive interview with the border czar, Tom Homan, as well. To some degree, it seems like the optics are integrally part of this in the eyes of the Trump administration, and in particular, the president.
Certainly, and you know as well as anybody, Hallie, that the Trump administration, the president himself, loves talking about immigration and law and order. This is the intersection of that. So it's really no surprise that they are putting out several administration officials on the cable networks this evening, trying to get that message across. And if you notice, something that has really fallen out of the headlines over the weekend, we're no longer talking about the feud between President Trump and Elon Musk. We're no longer talking about the challenges that he is facing, trying to get his so-called big, beautiful bill through Congress. Actually, House Speaker Mike Johnson was here at the White House today, talking with reporters about that very issue. Didn't get that much attention. He had to field questions about what was going on in California instead. And that is exactly what the White House wants, to be able to talk about law and order and immigration, and to play those pictures that you're seeing on your screen right there, Hallie.
Gabe Gutierrez, live for us on the North Lawn. Gabe, thank you very much. One thing we are, of course, continuing to talk about, not just the issues Gabe brought up, but that travel ban that is now in its first full day of being in effect, with anger from around the world. Millions of people now from 12 countries across Africa and the Middle East blocked from coming into the U.S.
Trump's story is propaganda. There is security in our country.
What more can we expect from being worse than what we are already experiencing? Since President Trump, I see everything as worse.
This travel ban stopping people from places like Afghanistan, Iran, Libya from traveling into the U.S. unless they're already here with a visa. It's also making it really hard for people in 7 other countries like Venezuela to get in. The president says this is all meant to prevent terrorism and to protect national security in this country. And so far, it hasn't triggered any legal challenges just yet. It does mean a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people, like one Burmese American woman speaking with NBC News, who says it feels like the rug's been pulled out from under her after she bought plane tickets to bring family from Myanmar to the U.S. the day before the ban was announced. I want to bring in our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, who is joining us now. And Andrea, we're also hearing from a Venezuelan American woman who says she's now afraid she is never going to see her grandparents again. Help us understand some of the practical impacts here.
Well, the impacts are enormous because you're talking about people from 12 countries, plus 7 more who have more limited, not a complete ban, but other limitations. And the White House, the administration has been very careful this time, contrary to the ban during the first Trump term, which got turned back by several courts and eventually had to get up to the Supreme Court when it was watered down and finally approved. They've been very specific, saying that these are countries that have normally approved people who have overstayed their legal visas, overstayed their time, their temporary time, and not gone back as they were required to. So they've justified it country by country, but the criticism is that these are countries, mostly of the 12 that are totally banned, mostly from Africa and the Middle East, people of color. So there's the question of racism, whether that is a motivation. And it's also people who have been allied with us. For instance, I talked to today a man who is from Afghanistan. He worked as a translator for 7 years with the U.S. military under great risk of personal harm to him. He got out under one of the exceptions before the fall of the government there and the Taliban takeover, worked here, got his citizenship, enlisted in the Marines, went back with the U.S. military, again in Helmand Province, a really difficult area, did another whole tour of duty, came back here, and then tried to get his family here, which would have been perfectly permissible. Well, it took several years after the Taliban takeover for them to get approved. They finally got approved at the end of last year, in December 24. They had all the approvals, were ready to wait for that final say-so to come to the U.S., and he advised them that they could get only 2 days' notice so that they should sell everything. They sold everything they owned. They sold their business, their car. And now the ban, they're totally blocked. His aging parents, he thinks he'll never see them again. And I asked him what was the risk. This is what happens to people who are identified by the Taliban. So we couldn't show his identity. This is what he said to us. What does the Taliban do to people that they find out have relatives who worked for the U.S.?
Not only Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and they are active and they are in the sleeping cells. If they find people that, okay, they have someone who served in the U.S. military, and of course they will not be safe, including my family.
Terrible things happen. People are taken from their homes in the middle of the night. They're tortured in jails, and sometimes they're never seen again. So that's the risk. That's why he has to be kept, his identity has to be kept secret. But Hallie, it is devastating to the families involved, and American veterans are very angry that they are leaving behind their partners, their translators, their people who helped out them in the war for all those years.
Andrea Mitchell, important reporting. Thank you very much for bringing it to us tonight.
Thank
also
you.
Tonight, in just the last few hours here out west, a suspect believed to have killed 2 people on the Vegas Strip is now in custody after turning himself in. That very scary shooting captured on camera on a busy Sunday night. We're going to show you the moment it happened with an obvious warning. It is hard to watch. Here's a clip. One of the people involved was live streaming before it all went down. Police say the suspect and the victims knew each other and apparently were not on good terms. Ryan Chandler has made his way to Vegas and is joining us now. Bring us up to speed, Ryan, on what we know and what happens from here.
Well, hey, Hallie, I want to show you. This is exactly where that shooting happened less than 24 hours ago. You see this buzzing sidewalk, the famous spot in front of the Bellagio full of people trying to catch a glimpse of these fountains. A lot of people that we've spoken to here say they have no idea that just last night 2 people were shot and killed here. Police say 41-year-old Manuel Ruiz turned himself into a Henderson Police Department this morning. We also found a man here who told us he was just steps away when those shots rang out, running for safety, taking shelter in a nearby hotel. Here's some of what he told us.
I heard like 7 gunshots, and I got really scared, but I didn't know what was going on because everything happened so fast.
What were your first thoughts when you heard gunfire ring out?
I thought it was a mass shooting.
And Hallie, as of last update, we've been trying to ask questions of the local police departments here in Las Vegas about the identities of these victims. Hallie, as of right now, they have not yet released who those victims are.
Ryan Chandler live for us in Las Vegas tonight. Ryan, thank you. We're also learning tonight that all 6 people on board a small plane that crashed off the coast of San Diego Sunday are presumed dead, according to the FAA. As you've got the Coast Guard, as we speak, looking through this really big debris field. They're hoping to recover the bodies and try to figure out what went wrong on the flight. Flight tracker shows the plane kind of veering back and forth before crashing as air traffic, you see the track here, as air traffic controllers tried to get in touch with the pilot. Listen.
4 Bravo Alpha, low altitude alert, climb immediately. 4 Bravo Alpha, radar contact lost.
I want to bring in NBC's Stephen Romo now. Stephen, what do we know?
Yeah, Hallie, distressing stuff. That audio goes on, and you can hear the pilots actually saying Mayday before they lose contact with him. Air traffic control could also be heard telling that pilot to climb from above the 1,000 mark where they were up to 4,000, but that just did not happen. Instead, they did end up losing contact. The FAA says that pilot, the 4 others on board, presumed dead. Their names have not been released, but the listed owner of that aircraft, Optimal Health, saying that they recently sold that plane. They released a statement saying, in part, "We personally know several of the passengers on board, and our sincerest condolences are offered to those affected by the tragedy, all of whom are incredible members of our small community." Just distressing news here, Hallie.
We've also heard from eyewitnesses who were on the ground, Stephen.
Yeah, people out watching the skies happened to catch a glimpse of that plane. They said it looked like it was struggling even from their vantage point. There was one man who was a surfer nearby who said he could tell that the plane was having some trouble. He kept his eye on it, and here's what he said he saw.
And then it would dip down below, and I saw that one very close call to the water. Went back up into the clouds. It sounded like it was doing loops, like, wow. And then I saw it come straight down into the water. After I saw the splash, about 6 seconds later, it was dead silent. I knew that that they went in the water nose first at high speed.
Now, that plane had only been in the air for a matter of minutes. Air traffic control was trying to get them to an airport on Coronado Island, which is just off the coast of San Diego, but they were never able to make it there. The NTSB is now investigating.
Stephen Romo, thank you very much for that. Coming up here on the show, the new legal setback tonight for Justin Baldoni, why a judge is tossing out his $400 million lawsuit against Blake Lively. Plus, how police in London say somebody ended up on the tarmac. Look at that, running on the tarmac at Heathrow. Next. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, an Oklahoma inmate set to be retried for murder, but not for the death penalty. The attorney general there says it's clear Richard Glossip did not receive a fair trial, but is not dropping the charges, just now seeking a life sentence. The Supreme Court threw out Glossip's murder conviction earlier this year as well. Glossip says he is innocent in the 1997 murder of a motel owner in Oklahoma. Number 2, the health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., firing the CDC's panel of vaccine experts. That's like 17 members of an advisory committee who help make recommendations about who should get certain vaccines. Kennedy says the committee was, in his words, plagued with persistent conflicts of interest. The panel included public health experts from pediatricians to epidemiologists. We're watching for continued reaction to this as the night develops. Number 3, new video shows a man being chased down the tarmac at Heathrow Airport in London. Look at that. The airport didn't really give many details about what went on here. Why was this person running? Who is this person? What happened to this person, etc. They are investigating, and operations at the airport are back to normal at this point. Number 4, meteorologists say a new hurricane has formed off the coast of Mexico. Hurricane Barbara, it's being called. Winds are now up to 75 miles an hour, but they think it's a Cat 1 now. They think it could get stronger. Rip currents they're looking for, a ton of surf right there along the western coast. We'll keep an eye on that one to see if it develops into anything more. Number 5, the Indianapolis Colts announcing the 3 daughters of owner Jim Irsay will be taking over control of the team after Irsay's death last month. The daughters had been serving as vice chairs. One of them, Carly Irsay Gordon, will take on the role of principal owner. A big win tonight for Blake Lively over Justin Baldoni, with her team calling it a complete vindication after a federal judge tossed out Baldoni's $400 million defamation lawsuit. In this suit filed back in January, Baldoni accused his co-star, remember, and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, on the left there, of trying to destroy Baldoni's reputation by suing him for sexual harassment on the set of the movie It Ends With Us. All of it stemmed from a complaint filed by Lively last year that accused Baldoni and a lead producer on the film of repeatedly violating her physical boundaries and making inappropriate and sexual comments while on set. Danny Savalos is joining us now. I think everybody remembers this, Danny. It was super high profile. The suit, the countersuit, and now today, the judge tossing out Baldoni's defamation countersuit here. Why did the judge do this? What was the rationale?
Well, first, these kinds of motions are very hard to win. Judges almost never dismiss cases at this stage. Baldoni got every benefit of the doubt, and every allegation factually in his complaint was assumed to be true, and yet it still got dismissed. And the reasoning is that the defamation claims were largely, not completely, but largely based on Lively's complaint she submitted to a government agency, and those complaints are privileged. In other words, you can say things in those kinds of government agency complaints that you cannot say in a tweet or in a letter to somebody else. Then they would be defamation.
So this was not, just so I understand this and so people understand this was not the judge dismissing this suit on like a technicality, you know, it missed a deadline or whatever else. This was fairly substantially on the merits, right?
Well, technically, really what this is a failure to state a claim. So in other words, what the court does is it looks at the four corners of the complaint and says, let's assume everything Baldoni says is true. Does he state a claim under the law of defamation? And the answer is no, because that complaint made to a government agency is privileged. And in addition, they hadn't alleged enough knowledge that the statements were false.
So does Baldoni have any recourse here? Could he and his team rework this lawsuit and refile something similar? Or is that the end of the story there?
Yes and no. As to defamation and a claim for, say, civil extortion, those are out, and they're out for good. He is allowed to refile on claims such as the tortious interference with contract and breach of the duty of good faith in a contract. Those sound like a lot of words, but I will tell you, having filed these claims myself, these are not considered nearly as powerful as some of the other claims brought. I typically add them at the end of a laundry list of allegations or counts. It's usually the last or second to last counts. So it's not the strongest claim, and it's little consolation that he can go back and refile those claims.
In a statement, Blake Lively's team calls this a total victory and complete vindication. In your view, is it?
I would call it a near total victory because Baldoni's complaint is certainly on life support at this stage, but not completely gone. I'm really curious to see what, if anything, even really remains and what they choose to refile.
There was also a piece that people might remember where the New York Times was sued, I believe, for libel in this suit as well that was dismissed. The judge threw that out as well. Was it for the same rationale, Danny, or a different reason?
Essentially, yes. So if Lively's claims were privileged because she made them to a government agency, then the New York Times reporting on those allegations are similarly privileged, protected. They cannot be defamatory.
Danny Savalos putting it into plain English for us tonight, as always. Danny, thank you very much for that. Also, right now tonight, more than 50 million people are on alert for intense thunderstorms with the potential for wind as high as 80 miles an hour. We're talking about the Great Lakes. We're talking about the Ohio Valley. Even as parts of Texas, you see here, are cleaning up after a ton of wind and a ton of rain damaged some houses, took down some trees, and left thousands without powers. You've got tonight some big cities, Houston, Atlanta, Charleston, Pittsburgh, all in the current threat zone, with a lot of rain adding insult to injury for at least one family in St. Louis. Their house badly damaged by tornadoes last month, and now the rain coming in around the tarps. Look at that, just making everything even so much harder to clean up. I want to bring in Bill Cairns joining us now. It's deja vu again and again for some of these places that have been hit repeatedly in just the last few weeks. What are you watching for tonight into tomorrow?
Severe storms are, they're widely scattered, but where they're hitting hard, Hallie. And we've had a couple tornado warnings in the last hour. Nothing confirmed, no bad damage. But it's a huge area that at least is at risk. Not everyone's getting hit. Later tonight, we'll watch West Texas once again. But we're watching Michigan and then all of the South and right up through the Appalachians into Pennsylvania. Some of our strongest storms have actually been in areas of the, from Pennsylvania northwards up here into western New York. And we could see some isolated tornadoes through the rest of tonight. We do not expect an outbreak. So our severe thunderstorm watch continues for until 10 p.m. here. They're on the Pittsburgh area. The severe thunderstorm watch also in central Michigan goes to 10 o'clock. Earlier, about a half hour ago, we had a tornado warning near Erie, Pennsylvania, kind of a place usually we talk a lot about, like, incredible lake effect snow in the wintertime. That is now a severe thunderstorm warning. Pittsburgh, it looks like the line of storms kind of broke apart perfectly for you, so the greater Pittsburgh area is okay. But that severe thunderstorm warning right now just south of Buffalo. We only have one active tornado warning, Hallie, and that's to the south of Norfolk, Virginia, and that's this little hook you see on the bottom down here. That'll be heading near Mycock or towards the coast just south of Virginia Beach in about the next half hour or so. Other than that, we're just watching some pretty strong thunderstorms off the coast near Myrtle Beach, large hail and damaging winds with that storm system. Tomorrow, we finally get a break from our 6 days in a row of tracking severe storms. The only issue I'm going to watch tomorrow is that heavy rain developing in Texas. We do have a slight risk of seeing some flash flooding happening, Hallie. But it's been quite a stretch here from the end of May all the way through the start of June. Each and every day we've been tracking something.
Yeah. Bill Cairns, plenty to keep you busy back home on the East Coast. Bill, thank you very much for that. A lot more to get to when we come back, including that international showdown over Greta Thunberg's so-called Freedom Flotilla. What we're learning about where the world-famous climate activist is now. A big update tonight to an international showdown involving one of the world's most well-known climate activists. Greta Thunberg and others on an aid boat trying to get to Gaza are now in Israel at a port there, according to that country's foreign ministry, which posted a picture of Thunberg on X saying the passengers are all going through medical exams now to make sure they're okay. This is a group that was stopped after trying to break this naval blockade that Israel has and deliver humanitarian help to Gaza. They've been on the water. You see some of the images here for about a week. The so-called Freedom Flotilla organization, which had organized this voyage, said that the activists were kidnapped, in their words, by Israeli forces. But Israel's foreign ministry has described the whole thing as basically a PR stunt. They called it the selfie yacht. Matt Bradley is joining us now. It certainly has focused attention on this boat, on Greta Thunberg, and on what they were trying to do to get aid to Gaza here. Tell us more about what we know about where Thunberg and these others are and what Israel's saying.
Yeah, well, it sounds like they're in Ashdod port, which is just north of the Gaza Strip. They were brought there by the Israelis who intercepted their sailing ship. It was, it had masts, it had sails. It was caught right off the coast, northern coast of Egypt. And it looks as though, according to the foreign ministry, that all 12 of these activists are going to be brought here to Tel Aviv, to Ben Gurion Airport, just down the road, where they're going to all be deported very quickly to their home countries. So that's kind of what's next here. But, as you mentioned, Hallie, the Israeli government has been doing their very best in all of their public statements, not just to diminish this, but really to mock it, to make fun of it, to call this celebrity sort of selfie yacht, to talk about these people are celebrities. They even use the term the show is over. To them, this was a sideshow, and they want to make it clear that this was, as much as they see it, a joke.
To Thunberg, of course, Matt, and the others on that aid boat, they saw it as and still see it as a matter of literally life and death, especially with growing concerns about starvation in Gaza from some observers here. Can you walk us through that piece of it? Because that is continuing to escalate.
That's exactly right. And, the fact is, as you mentioned, Hallie, life and death for the people in Gaza, maybe not for the people who were on that boat. And that whole interception went down with almost no violence and no injuries. But the fact of the matter is, even though the aid they were bringing was minimal, it was less than a truckload, according to the Israelis, the problem in the Gaza Strip is dire. We've been seeing famine-like conditions. We've been seeing worsening humanitarian circumstances. And now we've been seeing an aid plan that really has been marked by violence ever since it started 2 weeks ago. This is a U.S.-backed aid plan where we've been seeing gunfire that has been killing more than 100 people, according to health authorities in the Gaza Strip, which is run by Hamas, just because they're lining up to try to get food. So really, when we're talking about this problem, we're talking about people who are trying to survive and getting gunned down while trying to do it. Hallie?
Matt Bradley live for us in Tel Aviv tonight, watching all of that. Matt, keep us updated on what happens from here. Appreciate your reporting on that for us tonight. NBC News covers hundreds of other stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their region in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Northeast Bureau, at least 2 people have been hurt after this car crashed into a Dollar Tree in Delaware. Look at this. You see the damage afterwards? It apparently rammed into multiple aisles. Huge mess. Police are still investigating. Out of our Western Bureau, crews in California rescuing a couple of tourists after they got stuck on a cliff. They were apparently trying to look at a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. One of them dropped their phone, tried to go after it, went down this pretty steep hill. You can see this rescue team using ropes to get him back on top of the cliff. Fortunately, everybody is okay, but do I need to give the reminder, folks? You are more important than your phone, your physical health and safety. PSA. Out of our Midwest Bureau, an endangered wolf center sending these 6 newborn wolf pups, look at them, to another state to help save them from extinction. They're headed from Missouri to New Mexico as part of a pup fostering program. There are apparently fewer than 300 of these Mexican wolf pups left in the world. The center says the pups will be fostered by 2 wild packs. Coming up here on the show, some crypto-rich families going to extremes to try to protect their money and themselves. What some are now doing to avoid becoming targets of kidnappings or attacks. An influencer with a fortune in Bitcoin is doing something kind of extreme to protect his family's money as more attacks are targeting people who hold a lot of crypto. We've been telling you about the spike in incidents like the one you're seeing here from New York last month. Criminals kidnapping, in some instances even torturing people, trying to steal their crypto wallets. Enter the father of the self-proclaimed Bitcoin family. He and his wife and his 3 girls converted all their money to Bitcoin. They've been using it to travel the world full-time for years. But in the face of what they say are more threats to their safety, they've devised this super complicated system to protect their Bitcoin wallets that involve parts of their password on metal cards that are hidden across 4 continents around the world. If you're like, wait, why? What? Remember, with crypto, you do not have to have a bank. Like, you do not actually have a bank that secures your money. So anybody who gets a hold of your crypto wallet and has your password gets access to all of it, right? They get access to every cent immediately. I want to bring in CNBC's Mackenzie Sigalos, who profiled the Bitcoin family. It is fascinating, Mackenzie, because here on this show, we've talked about these so-called crypto kidnappings, and now this family thinks they've devised, in kind of this really, really wide-ranging way, a plan to keep themselves safer. Walk us through it.
So, Hallie, the Bitcoin family has actually downgraded their tech to stay safe, ditching hardware wallets entirely over concerns about backdoors and remote access. And instead, their 24-word Bitcoin seed phrase, which is the password to their fortune, is split into multiple parts. Now, some are stored digitally using encrypted platforms, but others are etched by hand into fireproof steel plates. Then each of those metal plates is hidden in a different location around the world. So it's a kind of old school encryption, decentralized, analog, and completely offline. Now, the father of the family, Diddy Combs, told me that he even swaps out certain words to throw off attackers and just memorizes which ones he changed. And it's a system that's becoming more common amid this spike in crypto kidnappings, Hallie.
Talk through that a bit, because, how is the crypto world, as you've been reporting on it, Mackenzie, adjusting to some of these new threats now, these more sophisticated criminals looking to target their money?
So as crypto becomes more widely adopted, the risks have actually gone offline, and that's led many to ditch hardware wallets. Those are the physical devices that store your private keys, because if someone steals it or forces you to unlock it, your funds disappear. Now, some have tried hiding them in vaults or high-security bunkers, but that still means that you're handing control to a third party. And we've already seen the risks of centralized platforms like FTX. Even Coinbase, the biggest U.S. exchange and arguably the most trusted brand out there, recently disclosed a breach involving insiders being bribed, not hacked. And that's pushed others to store seed phrases offline. So now what we're seeing is a shift towards setups that split control, like multiple signature wallets, where several people have to approve a transaction, kind of like needing multiple keys to open one safe.
Mackenzie Sigalos, that is just so interesting. Thank you for bringing us a glimpse into this world. We appreciate it. Great to see you on the show, as always. Thank you. Back now with some breaking news here in Los Angeles. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, in just the last few minutes, tweeting, posting online that because of what he calls increased threats to federal law enforcement officers and federal buildings, look at that, those 700 active duty Marines are being deployed to Los Angeles. This is significant. Remember, earlier in the show, we told you that they had been mobilized from 29 Palms to Camp Pendleton. Now you have the defense secretary saying they are now being deployed to L.A. from Camp Pendleton, meaning, as I bring in Gotti Schwartz now, who's in the middle of some of these demonstrations right now, meaning it is possible that at some point tonight, tomorrow morning, you could see active duty Marines on the ground in L.A. We're hearing some new reaction from the police chief on all this, Gotti.
Yeah, the police chief is saying that he's seen those reports. He has not heard directly from the Marine Corps or anybody from the Department of Defense. Of course, this is all fluid. It's all coming down right now. So we're seeing if those lines of communications are established at some point tonight. But I do want to show you, like over there, this is the federal building downtown. And if those Marines were to come to somewhere in the downtown area, they would probably be trying to reinforce this building. Over there in front of this crowd that you see, that's where you've got members of the California National Guard that are standing arm in arm with officers from Homeland Security. There's a trifecta going on. Over here, you've got CHP, California Highway Patrol. They are blocking the entrance to the freeway. And then over here, also California Highway Patrol. And then down there is LAPD. They've kind of pushed the skirmish lines to focus the protesters over here for now. This is the only open street this way. But again, what we were hearing in the crowd just a little while ago was the possibility that they were going to try to make a run to disrupt traffic once again on the freeway. The conversations that I overheard were, well, there's not enough people. We're not going to do it yet. There's not enough people. And officers are very conscious of the possibility. They prepared for it yesterday, and yet they were overrun. You saw protesters down on the freeway, and then that's when you saw the skirmish. And then right over here, there was an area where the police took cover. People were throwing lime scooters on top of the police cars, so things got very, very chaotic. So police are trying to prevent that from happening. Let me take you over here just a little bit closer. We might lose cell phone service because there are just a lot of people over in this area. But right now, there's probably about 500, maybe 600 protesters standing in front of the federal building. And then that's the line of HSI, and it looks like Homeland Security officers standing next to the California National Guard. They are also holding less than lethal weaponry. And then you've got all kinds of people out front. So far, we've seen relative peace. We have seen bottles thrown, 2 bottles thrown by my count, but we also see some protesters, organized protesters, rush in anytime things get incensed. And there are people on the front line that are trying to keep those tempers from flaring. There's also a line of clergy that has been trying to quell some of the uprising here. But so far, again, we're just seeing a standoff between the National Guard soldiers, those officers, and this protest. Hallie?
Gotti Schwartz there on the ground live here in Los Angeles. Gotti, we're going to be looking for more of your field anchoring coming up on Stay Tuned Now in just about an hour. Gotti and his team will be on the ground out in the thick of it here in L.A. with the eyes of the nation watching what's happening here on the West Coast. I'm Hallie Jackson on assignment in Los Angeles. Thank you, as always, for watching. We've got more coverage picking up right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.